People who accidentally ruined someone's life without meaning to. What happened? Coworker would always talk about how Jessica and I were going to go here, or Jesse and I went there, or Jess and I got up to this, that, or the other. One day I ran into him and his wife in the wild. He introduced her only as my wife. I, of course, said, "Oh, Jessica, it's so nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you." Gentle reader, his wife's name was not Jessica. I feel nothing about it. He shouldn't have been cheating on his wife, but if he was going to, he shouldn't have spent years telling me about Jessica, then introduce his wife only as my wife. Next story. I do photography and videography at weddings. This particular wedding, half the guests spoke a language I am not fluent in, and it was before AI translations existed. The mother of the bride said something derogatory about the groom's mom in her native language, and I included it in their video because she was smiling when she said it. Turns out the groom's mom spoke multiple languages. Next story. Many years ago, I was going to the track, harness races, and I asked a guy, Alan, if he wanted to tag along. He was 17, I think. He'd never even seen a horse before. Each race, I would tell him what I thought, and he'd either bet $2 or skip the race. $2 was important to him. Then, in a late race, there was a horse named Minya Mitzvah. He got all excited. "A Jewish horse, I gotta bet him!" The horse was awful, and I told him so. Went off at 30-1. This was early winter, and there was a heavy fog obscuring the far side of the track. Off they go and disappear into the fog. Even the announcer is saying, "Your guess is as good as mine." They're in the fog for a long time, and finally the first horse emerges, alone. We're waiting for the rest of the pack, which eventually the field emerges, but the lead horse is way out in front. Who knows what happened in that fog? We can now see the colors, and sure enough, it's Minya Mitzvah. It cruises home, and Alan reveals that he bet $10. So now this kid suddenly has more money than he'd ever seen in his life. His brain is doing cartwheels. He was hooked. From that day on, he became a degenerate gambler, always chasing that high. Years later, he told me, "I can't stop. Even if you gave me $1 million, I'd be broke in a year." All because of a Jewish horse and me casually asking him if he wanted to tag along. Ah man, this is how I feel about FanDuel. Gambling is a dangerous mistress, guys. You hit one big and then you never win again. Next story. I work in human resources, and way back when I was new and naive, I had a home address change request for an employee come across my desk. I couldn't read the handwriting and wanted to be sure I put in the correct new address. So I called their house and their wife answered. I asked her about it, and much to my surprise, she said, "What the heck are you talking about?" The employee came up to me a few days later and said, "I didn't tell her I was moving out yet." Next story. Temporarily, I was looking after my friend's apartment while they were on vacation. There was building work outside and someone hit a downpipe of the toilet, which broke the ceramic toilet bowl, flooding the bathroom. I cleaned it all up, then complained to the building management and asked for the toilet to be replaced before they got back, which set off a series of events that led to them being evicted. It turned out that they were illegally subletting without knowing it. I felt like absolute crap at the time, but they ended up moving back to Australia because of it, and living a good life there, so I guess I'm okay with it now. Next story. My good friend was scheduled to have surgery when it was discovered she had an aneurysm. I was with her at the hospital with her family, and right before she was taken away, she handed me her phone and said she wanted me to keep it until she was in recovery. She ended up dying on the table. She was a heavy smoker for 20 plus years, and the doctor couldn't find any good tissue to graft to save her. I turned her phone back on and handed it to her husband. It was maybe 24 hours after her death when we discovered that she had been having an affair for years, had been embezzling money from the business to provide for her boyfriend, and signed over a car to him that he was supposedly still paying for. It broke all of us, and I still have unresolved feelings towards her for putting me in that position. I think she knew I would figure it out and expected me to cover for her. I love and miss you, Amy, but you're a piece of crap for doing that to your family. Next story. I caught my brother-in-law essaying his 9-year-old daughter. He unalived himself afterwards to avoid going to jail. I have no regrets. He had been essaying her since she was 5 years old, his own daughter. She will be 18 this year. Her life is 100 times better with him gone. I am grateful I caught him, because we wouldn't have known otherwise, because he threatened her and her brothers into silence. I was only 21 at the time of catching him. It was a very traumatic thing to witness, let alone her experiencing it, but she is safe, and that is all that matters to me. Next story. I was working for a federal program and had a boss who hired her sister without disclosing to the higher-ups that it was her sister, a disclosure required by the program. Boss then paid the sister 2 times the usual rate for the job, and sister was logging a lot of extra work hours that she hadn't actually been working. I only found out because my boss insisted I needed to do the same sheet inputs for her because she couldn't be bothered. Boss told me to take any questions to boss's boss and left for the day. I noticed the discrepancy immediately and went to boss's boss to let them know there was an issue with time tracking versus scheduling on her sister's timesheet and wanted to know what I should do. The sister thing was news to boss's boss, and then the discrepancy triggered an investigation that uncovered a whole bunch of other misuse of government funding. Boss lost her job, the FBI got involved, and boss eventually ended up with some massive fines and jail time. Knowing what I now know, I would accidentally report her again. Next story. I took video and pics for the yearbook at a high school assembly. It was some sort of dare deal, don't do drugs, strongmen ripping phone books, do all the sorts of strongman things, you know. Took it home to review the tape, this was the late 90s, and get pics developed. Mom saw it, asked for copies, as she paid for the pics and the film to be digitized, and would be reimbursed by the school. No problem. Turns out she worked with one of them. She in human resources, him in whatever capacity, keeping it vague. He was out on workers' compensation and disability, saying he couldn't work or really move meaningfully in his life. He was almost claiming to be partially bedridden. That was not the case. Sorry, random strong guy. Next story. I suggested a kid I knew at school to consider joining the military and using the GI Bill later in life after he wasn't able to get accepted to a college or university. He thought it was a fantastic idea, so he went for it. Dude's convoy hit an IED on his first deployment. He survived but has a litany of health problems. I feel terrible for ever suggesting it. Next story. Coworker went on a road trip to Seattle. I jokingly asked him to bring back some drugs. I was not a user and didn't actually want any. It was clearly a joke. Well, the day that he's supposed to be back, he calls me and says he's running late and might not be there on time. So I don't get concerned when he's not in at his scheduled time. An hour later, I call him again. No answer. He doesn't come in that night. I call the next day. He was speeding excessively to get to work, still in another state, and gets pulled over. Well, he has some drugs in the car, just a personal amount, but still not great. The problem was that he had very small amounts of hard drugs he was bringing me back as a joke. That joke ruined his life. He had to move to that state in hopes of avoiding a charge for transporting drugs over state lines. Since he had 2 separate kinds of drugs, they pinned a dealing charge on him. It didn't end up in jail time, but long probation, and he had to live in a crappy place for years. I apologized to him, and I felt terrible. He never once blamed me or had any animosity, but he knew it was his choice and that he had effed up. I still felt bad about it. Next story. He was effing around at work, never getting crap done, always calling out for bullcrap reasons, etc. I ended up stuck doing all his work. So once he was called out for a splitting, puking migraine, then posted on Facebook about being at a concert, I narked. They fired him a few weeks later, and since his wife refused to work, they ended up losing their house. Next story. Not directly, but a friend came to me once to casually ask me about another friend and how they were handling their new job. The friend with the new job had been ecstatic because it was a huge opportunity for their career in an oversaturated field. It was essentially their big break. I told the first friend that they were loving it and handling it just fine, and they asked if they were stressed or anything. I offhandedly said something about them having friction with one of their coworkers, but that they were doing fine with it. What I didn't know is that friend asking me these questions was friends with the coworker and used what I told that friend to help get my friend fired for creating a toxic work environment. Not only was it very high school drama, but it ruined the trajectory of my friend's career completely, and they're still struggling today to find meaningful employment despite this happening 4 years ago. Next story. Almost. Years back, working at a hardware store, I knocked a full pallet of lime off a 20-foot-high shelf. Came within inches of killing a person just standing there. I hopped off the forklift grumbling about the mess I would have to clean up and saw the person standing there completely unharmed, but still white as a sheet, pupils dilated. I repeatedly apologized, but my words never registered. They just walked away and left the store. Next story. I was essayed by another student living in my dorm during my first year of university. I spoke out about it, which led to 2 other women coming forward with similar experiences. A couple of months later, administration discovered he was growing drugs in his room. This was grounds for being kicked out of residence. The next I heard about this guy was a couple of years later when an acquaintance had let me know he had gotten expelled from school, got mixed up with bad gambling, and self-unalived. I feel fine, because I did nothing but tell the truth. Next story. We kept having boxes of parts lost when they were shipped to customers and manufacturers, about $20,000 worth. I was in charge of operations, so I had to figure it out and keep it quiet, since we didn't know if it was one of our employees or not. I installed a GPS tracker in a box and had to ship it like 5 times back and forth between 2 of our locations until I finally got it figured out. It was an orchestration between one of our employees and a FedEx driver. Long story short, our HR fired our employer and alerted FedEx, who did the same. Our company did not press any civil charges, and the DA declined to prosecute because the evidence was very thin. I thought nothing of it for about 2 years. But then a fellow employee linked me to a news article that the former FedEx employee had recently died from a drug overdose while homeless. I don't know if my solving our theft problem directly caused it, but I'm sure it contributed to their downward spiral. Next story. I was upset at a kid in 5th grade because he kept copying off my tests. So I went and told the teacher, and after I bombed a test on purpose and they compared answers, it was determined that kid was indeed copying off me. The kid was tested and it was determined that they were illiterate, and they were made to go back a whole grade. I don't really feel bad because F that guy, and hopefully he knows how to read now. Next story. I unknowingly introduced a really good friend to the most toxic person I've ever come across in my life. My college buddy, Chris, fake name, and I both had a Thursday afternoon off and decided to hit up a happy hour. It was early. There were only about a dozen people in the bar, including us and a group of 3 girls. One of the girls was 100% Chris's type. Tall, thin, dark hair, outgoing, but he was a shy guy and didn't have the courage to strike up a conversation. 30 minutes and some liquid courage later, I take it upon myself to start chatting with the girls and specifically introduced Chris to the tall, dark-haired girl Veronica, fake name again for this story. She and her friends were all single, our age, in a nursing program at a crosstown school, and seemed like nice gals. Chris, myself, and the girls ended up shutting down the bar that night, and by 10 p.m., Chris and Veronica were fully sucking face and acting like the rest of us didn't exist. I was happy for him, but I got a little nervous when they ended up leaving together and her friends started joking about not knowing what he was in for. Whatever, he's an adult, far be it from me to rain on his parade. After that night, Chris effectively disappeared off the map. The only times I would see him was in class or at that same bar with Veronica. The dude just seemed off, but refused to talk about it and insisted he was happy. Veronica, on the hand, refused to let him out of her sight, would make him wait outside the bathroom for her. Surprise, surprise. Turns out Veronica was a complete sociopath, narcissist, straight-up con artist who bled Chris dry, both emotionally and financially. Highlights include, but are not limited to, fake pregnancies, forcing him to cut off friends, demanding he drop classes to fit her schedule, and manipulating him into paying her rent, the bills, the lifestyle. Now, Chris came from a nice upper middle class, who he was super close with, and apparently they rightfully had some suspicions about this girl. I just figured he was head over heels for Veronica and ignoring us all. But I knew something was wrong when his mom called me and asked if I had spoken to Chris lately. Turns out he had drained his bank account and started racking up significant debt on a credit card he shared with his parents, buying crazy expensive jewelry, makeup, clothes, all for Veronica. That was enough for his parents to drive 4 hours from their hometown to stage a mini intervention. In the end, Chris had to drop out of school, move back home, and his parents ended up getting a restraining order against Veronica. His parents forced him to get a job and pay off the $3,000 he accrued, and ended up forfeiting his partial football scholarship. I lost touch with him once he moved back home, but I sometimes wonder how his life would have turned out if we didn't go to happy hour at Kelly's on that random Thursday. Next story. I went to high school with this quiet kid named Jay. Kind of kid who sat at the back of the class, wore the same surplus military jacket every day, kinda greasy. But a few times we spoke, and we had a lot in common. Dude was super into video games and nerd crap, and so was I. So I kinda took him under my wing and introduced him to my friends. We played D&D together, PC games, the works. I did my best to make him included in all the stuff we did, because prior to this, his only friends were his younger brother and his few buddies. My best friend and I were already smoking it up at the time, and Jay knew about it. One day he asked to meet up with us after school and try it for the first time. I was stoked. Dude was breaking out of his shell because of us, talking to people, smiling. It seemed like a good thing. So we met up and popped his weed cherry after school. It was downhill rapidly after that. Turns out Jay has an addictive personality. Within 6 months of this, the quiet, reserved kid smoking weed, he was ordering any research chems he could off the internet. This was before the Research Analog Act, so it was completely legal and easy to order crap like entire vials of 25I or other substances. Dude was frying himself, acting erratically. He even dropped out of school before the next year, senior year, started. Keep in mind, this dude had really effing good grades prior to this. Kept his head down, did well in school, and floated by without anyone noticing. After high school, he got super into stimulants. Started with abusing the Vyvanse he was prescribed and likely didn't need since it upped the crap out of him. Then he moved on to some harder stuff, which I did indeed partake in with him. Wish I hadn't, because I had no idea how far it would get out of control. He quickly moved further and further down. One night I was staying at his house with a buddy. Woke up on his couch at like 7 a.m. to him and my friend standing over me, literally smoking some stuff out of a gas station pipe. I was probably breathing that effing crap in. When I asked them what the F they were doing, they told me they were about to clean the house. I was flabbergasted. I got up and drove myself home dangerously tired. Barely made it home without passing out, but I just could not stay there any longer. I stopped talking to him after that. The whole thing gave me this foreboding feeling I just couldn't shake. Turns out I was right. Dude started robbing convenience stores at gunpoint. With a shotgun he bought at Bass Pro Shop using his employee discount. He even had the other buddy, who literally couldn't drive, no license, and no experience, be his getaway driver. Somehow, someway, he never got caught. Later on it came out he was into lolly and other things that you can imagine. Never got caught for that either. I was told he knew that he might be in trouble, so he ran a magnet over every drive he had. I know a few people tried to talk to the police about it, but it never went anywhere. He's now been accused of essaying his nephews, but it's also never gone anywhere. I washed my hands of it and him years ago. I know that it isn't exactly my fault that someone else would have introduced him to drugs, that I didn't steer him towards the effing wild crap, that he would go too far down the line, but I still feel like it's kind of my fault. Next story. I almost started a forest fire by accident once. I was burning a burn pile, and I didn't take enough safety measures. The wind started gusting, which started the grass around it on fire. I kept putting it out, and the wind would gust again, igniting it all over and over. I rushed to the house, called the fire department on myself, and rushed back outside with hoses connecting many together to reach the fire. I got the fire put out after about half an acre burned. The fire department came after it was out. It would have reached the trees before they got here. I almost caused a major fire. I felt terrible about it, of course. My hands were blistered from trying to put it out with a shovel over and over. The grass was green, but there was dead, dry grass under it. Combined with the wind, it was just a nightmare. Next story. When I was a punk teen, I left home and was living in a men's mansion in Hawaii. I had no license, had no car, but did have a love of surfing and a drug habit. I paid a friend of a friend like $50 to borrow a car, only to later get arrested for possession of a stolen car. Yeah, it was stolen, and for some drug charges. I refuse to say who I got the car from or how I got it. I ain't no snitch. But when my property was inventoried, they saw a slip of paper with a name, address, and phone number on it, and hilariously a note that said, "Go incognito." I had written that down because the friend said it when he was telling me about the dude I was borrowing the car from. In other words, dude's crooked. Be safe and be quiet. They used that info to investigate the guy. Learned that he'd been running a chop shop basically, and he went to full-on prison. Years later, I'm clean, got my crap together, started working in law enforcement even, and went to a funeral. The dude was also at the funeral. He came to me, said he had no hard feelings, that he had found God in prison, changed his life, etc. It provided a tiny bit of closure for us both and was really nice. Next story. I was once the tool which got someone's career stalled, but I do not feel entirely responsible. I was in therapy at an agency and knew 2 friends who were therapists working there. I also had a 3rd friend who had just self-unalived. At the funeral of our mutual friend, one of the people I knew from the mental health agency gossiped about private and confidential information they had snooped into the dead person's file to read. At my next therapy session, I was deeply grieving the self-unaliving loss and outraged about the gossip from the dead person's file. So, my therapist pressured me to reveal the name of who gossiped, and I refused. 2 days later, I got a phone call from my second friend who worked as a MSW therapist at the clinic, and who had absolutely no idea about what was going down, as we had not even spoken in a year or so, and she asked me why she was being questioned and possibly disciplined due to this gossiping. So I was forced into a position of having to reveal who indeed had been unprofessional, and that was the end of her career, and it was handled so beautifully that to this day she has no idea it was me or who reported her. The incident happened in 1990. I've often wanted to tell her, but feel it is best to leave as is. She really did it to herself. Next story. My childhood best friend and I were making a silly plan to sneak out of my room at night. We tied some sheets together to make a rope, movie style, and lowered it out of my 3rd floor bedroom window. She volunteered to go first, and after she was fully outside of my window, dangling in the air, the knots came loose. I watched her fall all the way down in slow motion and bounce off my water heater onto the grass. I ran outside, fully expecting her to be unconscious or worse, but she was unexpectedly fine and already up and walking towards my front door. We swore ourselves to secrecy about this moment and never told anybody what happened because we were so embarrassed. It became something we joked about for a while after. We did a lot of dumb and dangerous things as kids. Over the years, we've grown apart, and now as adults, she's developed a lot of mental challenges she didn't have before. Memory issues, social skills, overall executive functioning. I think about her often, and I can't help but suspect her falling out of my window had something to do with it. Next story. When I was 15, my friends and I went to a Cincinnati Reds baseball game with a large group of high schoolers at Old Riverfront Stadium. My friends and I snuck off from the group and convinced a guy to buy us beer. When he handed the beer to us, a plainclothes police officer came up and flashed his badge and started asking questions. When the guy was not forthcoming with answers and would not show his ID, the cop pulled out his cuffs and a tussle began as he tried to put them on the guy who bought us the beer. As the tussle began, my friends and I took the opportunity to run and rejoined our large group in the upper seating on the opposite side of the stadium. I'm not sure if it ruined his life, but him buying beer for us certainly ruined his night, and I'm sure cost him a bunch of legal fees. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry. Next story. I don't take full blame, but I didn't help. Had a boss. He was not a good boss. Effing employees, never came to work, raging alcoholic, good old boys type that didn't understand why I was so good at my job and my personality type, sales. He was a made man though. Basically, he was kept around because a connection with a high-level executive. Anyways, he was still on thin ice because he would regularly get wasted at company events and start fights or whatever. Still, he did advocate for me at times. He ticked me off when his boss came to town. He was also a piece of crap, but was forced to tolerate my boss. I unloaded, let him know he was effing employees, that he never worked, and that he was drinking again. A week or two later, my boss gets fired. New guy comes in who sucks maybe just a little less. Heard a couple years back, my old boss I probably helped get fired died of liver disease at 43. Rumor is he was begging to just be allowed to die. Years later, the executive who always bailed him out also died. Not sure of the cause. Next story. I was a volunteer firefighter a while back. Pager went off for a medical assist. We often had to help ambulances with patient lifts, etc. I opted to give my spot on the truck to the rookie we had in training. Figured a lift assist, he could help the guys and get that mental boost of being on the team. No biggie. I shouldn't have. Patient was an older guy who had been smoking in his wheelchair, wearing synthetics and with oxygen through the nose. Caught fire. was a lift assist to get the patient onto the helicopter and didn't survive the flight. The rookie had to see that as his first call. He left the brigade shortly after. Some crap you really can never unsee, and he was just a high schooler trying to do something good for the community. Hope he's okay these days. I've seen a lot that'll never leave me either, but I have come to accept that is how life and death can be, and I was prepared the moment the helmet was on for whatever came at me. Kid probably was his first experience of that and was just unprepared for it. Next story. I outed a school friend accidentally after stumbling across his photo on a gay dating website. I told my brother about it while talking over the phone, and I wasn't aware he had me on speaker. His roommate basically told everyone. When I heard her in the background, I knew the secret was out. I felt so bad that I outed someone. I died a little inside that day. This happened 20 years ago now. I don't know if it ruined his life, but his girlfriend left him. His friend group was now aware he was trying to suck the D at gay.com. It really wasn't cool of me, and I really felt so bad. Next story. This isn't my story, but an old coworker. And it's timely because it's 9/11 today. Said ex-coworker was a manager at a different company and at the time managed a team member who was not cutting it. He gave her lots of chances and opportunities but was failing miserably at the job. He made the decision to fire her. She was terribly upset, loved the job and company, begged him to stay. He had to say no. Fast forward a few weeks later, she gets a new job opportunity across the country. Needs to fly out for the interview. She was on one of the planes that hit the Twin Towers, on her way to that interview. He obviously had no control over any of this, but felt deep regret for a long time. What if he waited just a few more weeks to fire her, delayed her search for a new job, and then she wouldn't have been on that plane? That's a story that always sticks with me. Next story. 20 years ago, I was a computer tech at university. One day, my colleague has told me that she is reviewing a very interesting master's thesis and asked me whether I could find some authors mentioned in the references. Back then, everything was either not online or not easily searchable, so doing so required some Google FU. I have followed some obscure links and found a copy of the article that was referenced in one of the chapters. It turned out the whole chapter was basically a single citation. The student has only changed all the I's, IE's, instead of I have researched, it was the author has researched, etc. But of course, that is not how it works. That was literally on the eve of the defense of the thesis. It was a big scandal in the department. The student was kicked out. But given that they formally had finished their education, they could not repeat the year or anything like that. To receive the master's degree, they would have to essentially begin studies at a different department. Of course, it was not my fault. Still, being so instrumental in the demise of that person, even if completely deserved, made me feel quite strange. Next story. Big move on a busy road a while ago. Lots of moving parts, permits, store downstairs, reserved parking, just an incredibly stressful amount of management. When the day comes, me and my roomies were incredibly stressed because if one thing goes wrong, the whole house of cards collapses. It seemed, however, to be smooth sailing. The only thing that was annoying was that cars kept parking on our reserved space before we got our moving vans there. Most left numbers we could call, so we did, and usually they'd leave. Right before my dad is supposed to show up, 4 cars park in the reserved spot. They'd left no number, their owners weren't in sight. There was no way for me to get any of these cars out of there. To be clear, this meant that there was nowhere for my dad to park the moving van in this incredibly busy road. If he couldn't, we couldn't move my stuff, which was completely blocking the already very tight hallway and first part of the stairwell. Moving my stuff back up 4 floors was out of the question. I had like 40 minutes to solve this, so I just called the cops. They show up within 15 minutes, start writing down fines, and tell me they'll get a tow truck. Half an hour later, tow truck shows up, along with a couple of the car's owners. Big arguments between the cops and the owners. All of a sudden, reinforcements show up, like 6 other cops. Apparently, they'd seen drugs laying in one of the cars illegally parked there, and the dudes seemed to be working in the hookah bar across the street. So they detain the guy with the drugs and wait around for an hour to get a warrant to raid the effing hookah place. Meanwhile, one cop is holding back traffic, including trams in 2 directions, so my dad can parallel park the van. Other civilians are still arguing. It's effing chaos, and I'm just standing there so effing stressed out about what's going on. Suddenly, one of the cops asks me if the sandwich place downstairs in the building always has their outdoor seating out like this. Apparently that was also illegal, so they started getting into that. 4 people got pretty big fines and towing costs. The sandwich place has no more outdoor seating. The hookah place is closed, and I'm sure the drug user was arrested just because they parked in my spot. Next story. I divorced my ex-wife when I found out about her chronic cheating after dealing with years of her alcoholism. She immediately tried to get with the guy she was cheating with, who was married with kids. During a drunken fight between them, she called the cops and filed a false report against him. She had tried with me previously. It was proven fake. In his drunken state, he panicked and unalived himself. My ex had no remorse, instead posted on social media looking for sympathy. Now, 2 kids don't have a dad, and a wife lost a crappy husband. I only feel bad for the surviving family. I have no doubt I saved my own life by leaving her without trying to work things out. In the following month, she tricked a guy into marrying her, got knocked up, and bought a house. 12 months later, he reached out to me on Facebook, asking for divorce, lawyer advice, and asking me to testify against her. She signed away her rights as a mother when she saw my name on the court paperwork. Next story. It wasn't an accident per se, but I didn't know what the outcome would be when I filed for sexual harassment complaints against a high-level manager who worked in corporate for a grocery chain managing their remodels. He lost his job and his retirement benefits. He was so very close to retiring, but he was harassing every young female associate, and another manager actually encouraged us to file the complaint. He got what he deserved. Next story. When I was in high school, me and a friend of mine were trying to go to an MLB game. It was right before smartphones, and his car didn't have GPS, so we got lost going there. Lost touch with him for a couple of years before seeing him at a house party, and brought it up laughing about how we got lost. Turns out, he didn't tell his parents where we were going. His mom saw the toll bills from when we got lost and thought that it was his dad using the car to cheat on her, and that his dad slept on the couch for a year before my friend realized our excursion was a contributing factor to his parents fighting. When he told me the story, it seemed like they had reconciled, and I'm sure the toll bill wasn't the only thing, but it was pretty wild finding out that 2 dumb kids on summer break trying to go to a baseball game played a part in a marriage potentially breaking down. Next story. Not me, but my husband. He's the reason my parents are divorced. When my husband and I were engaged, I drove to work, and when I got there, instead of my car turning off like normal, it sounded like it just died. Let out its last breath, it was just gone. I called my fiance and he drove over, had my car towed to a shop, and got it looked at. He did all of this while I was at work. I later told my mom about this, and she was floored. You mean he just took care of it? He wasn't upset? He wasn't irritated to have to take care of it? If that happened to me, your dad would take care of it, but he would be so upset and find a way to blame me. My mom left my dad a week later. To be fair, this was their second divorce, but my mom saw everything so clearly that day. Next story. I apparently tricked my bullies into thinking I committed. I got homeschooled after the 7th grade due to bullying from peers and teachers. Apparently, there was a rumor among the peers that I died, and one boy in particular, who was real nasty to me, cried when he heard about my death. Next story. I was at a friend's house with my boyfriend when we were 14. My friends and I are white. My boyfriend was black. Her racist dad happened to see him kiss me, and he told us to leave. My friend badly wanted me to stay, but, it wasn't my house. I couldn't insist on staying, though now I wish I'd asked her to come with us. Maybe it would have made a difference. We left. Her dad went crazy. Her mom came home from work to find him with his hands around her throat. Her mom separated from him, and she and my friend lived somewhere else for a while until my friend figured it out and dated an older guy and let him get her pregnant so he'd have to marry her. He married her and joined the army. She had 2 kids from him and divorced him. The last time I talked to her, she was dating a guy who was nice, except when he was drinking. She probably married him since she has a different last name now. Her daughter has been in and out of the court system. Her son died of a drug overdose. He was dealing with it too. Her grandson is in prison for killing. ETA, I appreciate the kindness, but I doubt I'll ever shake the feeling that I had a hand in the way things turned out. Next story. I work in a public library, and because of how our book hold system works, I once accidentally informed some poor guy that he was likely getting a divorce. His wife had placed several DIY divorce books on hold, and they had a shared library account. When I called their landline phone number, the only one on the account, to tell them that their book holds were in, he answered the phone, and when I explained why I was calling, he asked what the book titles were. Without thinking, I rattled them all off. The Michigan Divorce Book, the Divorce Book, what every Michigan married man or woman needs to know, etc. I think there were 4 or 5 of them altogether, so it seemed pretty inevitable that he was headed for the single life. We don't typically share our patrons' private account information with anyone, including what books they have checked out or are on hold. But if they are sharing an account with another person, we have no idea which person on that account has placed the hold, and sharing an account means that all the account info is shared freely amongst all the people on the account. I know it's not my fault that this guy got a divorce, but man, is that a heck of a way to find out, and I do feel bad about it. Next story. In high school, we were putting away big set pieces after the talent show, and we stored one large item under a stairwell. This particular piece was very oblong and stuck out the side and partially obstructing a walkway. It wasn't a high-traffic area, and we were in a rush to move it out, so we just left it as is. I later heard that a friend tripped on it, busting her face open and needed some dental work. I don't think it was ever connected that I was one of the people who put it there. Next story. When I was in elementary school, I socked a boy in the face because he kept lifting my skirt up without permission. His mom was a huge female dog to me after this. Anyway, my parents got called into school after I had to explain what had happened. My dad: I have no problem with my daughter standing up for herself and hitting a boy who violated her. Man, I love you, Dad. Next story. Not ruined, but I fought an eviction. Lawyer was a complete turd. There wasn't a real reason to evict, so he had made up a ton of stuff. Anyway, he is an estate lawyer or something, so evictions aren't really his thing. So I managed to drag it out for like a year. His client, my landlord, was so upset that she dropped him. Then his lawyer had stalked me and had me evicted from my new unit where the same thing happened again, and his client dropped him. His reputation in town fell. Apparently this was his thing. He ended up changing his law firm's name. Next story. This is a fun one. I thought I was doing the right thing. Back in high school, I had a group of friends that I used to eat lunch with every day. We all lived in the same 2 or 3 neighborhood block radius, so it made sense that we all hung out in school and out of school. We will call one of the guys Dan. Well, one day at lunch, a girl that was in my ROTC class came up to me with her boyfriend and asked to talk to me. I said, "What's on your mind?" She says, "Why do you hang out with that guy?" And I said, "Because he's my friend." And she said, "You know he SA'd me, right?" And I said, No one had ever said anything. Why didn't anybody ever tell me?" And she says, "I don't know, but I thought everybody knew." And I said, "Well, did you report it?" And she said, "No, because I didn't think the police would do anything." And I said, "Well, when did this happen?" And she said, "About a month ago." Later on in the day, I'm walking to a different class talking to another classmate of mine about the situation and how I was conflicted because I didn't know whether to report it or not. She made the decision for me by pushing me into the office of the ROTC program leader as we were walking past. I almost fell. So I spilled everything I knew to him about the entire conversation, and he listens intently, he's taking notes, and he says, "Okay, don't worry about it, I'll take care of everything." 2 or 3 days pass. Nothing happens. Shortly after that, I get called into the principal's office with the principal, the ROTC program lead, and 2 police officers. They were extremely nice to me. They basically said, well, we interviewed everybody involved, and everybody, including the girl, agreed that nothing ever happened. Nobody was ever SA'd. I was really scared because I thought I was going to get in trouble for making a false report or lying or something, even though I believed it to be the truth. I was a kid, you know? They said, "No, you're not in trouble. You did the right thing by coming to us. We just wanted to let you know the results of everything that had happened." So it came out that she lied about that and a bunch of other crap, and she actually ended up leaving the state because she couldn't go to school here anymore because people kept bullying her. I guess she said different things had happened in the past with different people, and it came out that pretty much none of it was true. I don't feel bad for what I did, but I certainly didn't mean for that to happen because I thought I was doing the right thing. Next story. There was this guy from school who I sort of grew up with. We were in most classes together, starting from kindergarten all the way to the end of high school. We weren't friends, but maybe acquaintances. Never talked, but were friendly with each other. One day, when I'm about 25-ish, he reached out over Facebook. We talked for a bit before he eventually asked if he could couch surf while he got his life together. I gave a wishy-washy answer because I wanted to help, but my younger sister, who knew his sibling, warned me not to. While I never had an issue with him in the past, I trusted my sister's judgment and eventually told him no. About a year later, there was a news article that he had self-unalived. And I know I'm not the reason his life turned, but I still feel pretty bad about it. Next story. I don't think it was his life, but it cost him a job. Coworker said he was going off for bereavement, saying a relative passed away. The next day he was off, and I worked directly with his sister-in-law, and she wasn't off. I offered my condolences. She asked, "What the frick are you talking about?" I told her about the relative. She got on her phone texting and said, "Nobody died." I thought, oh crap, and I walked away. It started a big investigation because company pays you for bereavement days, and he got fired for fraud. Next story. Oh man, do I have one. When I was like 19, I was riding a bicycle to work and got hit by a landscaping truck pulling out of a gas station. The two guys were so apologetic. Helped me up, checked out the bike, offered to give me a ride, everything. Nice guys. And I was okay, just stunned really. Well, some lady in the parking lot called the police. Turns out they didn't have documents. Cops arrested them both and impounded the truck, and then gave me a ticket for riding my bike wrong. I still feel bad because if I just got my crap together faster and left, they could have left before the cops got there and ruined their crap. Total time was less than 5 minutes from hit to the cops. They only show up that fast when you don't want them, I guess. Next story. I used to have this friend in middle school who knew I liked him, but he identified as straight. I'll call him Luke for this story. We got handsy one day in middle school towards the end of the year, but nothing happened outside of that. Then, about a year later, after our freshman year of high school, we met up again. Long story short, Luke and I dated that summer until he decided to break things off. Things were getting sort of serious for him, and it made him nervous having a boyfriend. He specifically said, "I don't know how to explain to girls in my school that might hit on me that I'm already seeing someone else." So we stopped dating and eventually stopped talking after that. Fast forward a couple of years and Luke reached out to me again to catch up, see how I was doing. I was in a serious relationship with someone I thought was going to be with me for a while, though that didn't happen due to my then boyfriend being a sociopath. In the midst of us catching up, Luke drops a bombshell on me. He tells me that he's engaged, which I was happy for him, but he also said he regretted breaking up with me back then and that he had never had feelings for anyone like he did for me, and hasn't since. He explained the real reason he broke up with me, saying that he didn't know how to come to terms with being bisexual and liking men. He couldn't come out then and certainly couldn't tell anyone about it now given his current situation, which, by the way, his fiance was either pregnant or had just given birth to his child. I can't remember which. He and I chatted for a bit longer, and I learned that he really wanted to explore his bisexuality more with his fiancée, but didn't know how to approach that conversation with her. I don't remember the specifics as this was years ago, but I eventually told him that if he cared about her and they had a good relationship that he should talk with her about his feelings. Reader, I couldn't believe what happened next. He said that he'd talk to her about everything when he felt like it was the right time and that she was ready. Several months go by, maybe even a year. I don't hear from him at all. Then I learned why. His fiancée went through his phone one day and found our messages. She saw him talk about being bi and how he still loved me and there would always be a place in his heart for me. She did not take that well. They fought constantly, and eventually she unexpectedly took their child and moved halfway across the country, cutting off all contact with him. He had no idea where they'd gone, but he knew that it was because of our conversations. She said as much. I know it wasn't my fault, but I definitely feel responsible. He became even more depressed after that, got into drugs, and things kind of went downhill for him. I know at some point he married someone else, and they had kids together. I learned that from a mutual friend. But I haven't heard from him in years, and now I still don't know if he ever gets to see his kid. Next story. This one time in college, me and this guy I knew were sitting around chatting. Then, more and more people I didn't know kept showing up, until there were about 10 of us sitting in a circle just talking about random things. This one guy came sitting down next to me, and eventually we got to memes. I jokingly said, "Mom's spaghetti is the best meme ever made," to which most agreed. Then this guy's eyes lit up. He was so excited and said, "If you guys like that, then I have something to show you." To which I made the mistake of jokingly going, "As long as it's not My Little Pony or something." He looked at me like I had just shot his dog. I immediately realized what I did and I tried to backtrack, but there was already blood in the water at that point. The two girls next to him looked over and asked, pretty cattily, "Aren't you that guy who walks around in the pony shirt?" And when he said it was his favorite character, they just tisked. I admitted at that point that my brother had made me watch an episode and it wasn't bad, but the guy just deflated. For the rest of the semester, I never heard him talk again. I never saw him in the later years either. I know it wasn't that bad, but I still think of it once in a while. Who tries to show a My Little Pony parody to a bunch of 20-somethings? Oh, and I also told a guy about Bitcoin before that first huge crash, and he also disappeared. In that case, I did warn him it's not a safe investment though, but, who knows. Next story. Source came to me, asking me to go to the local paper that a local college resident master was beating his child. Did it, got published, got fired, took a plane home, and it crashed into the Everglades, killing everyone. Don't feel too bad about it, as he was bad, and it wasn't just me, but still a little odd thinking my actions contributed to someone's death. Well, guys, that concludes our stories of accidentally ruining people's lives. I actually can't think of a time that I've done that, but if you guys feel like sharing, feel free to do that. I would also mention to probably not hold on to a lot of guilt. This wasn't the most upbeat one we've read in a while. And I think it's important to mention that while sometimes we might influence a certain path or direct the course of someone's life, you are not directly responsible, and I hope most people aren't holding some sort of emotional weight over all of this for the rest of eternity. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for being here with me, and we will see you in the next one.